So today I'm here with my uncle. How you doing today, sir?
Doing great, Jonathan.
All right, and we're talking about, I believe, a drug case today, correct?
Yes, we're talking about a case I had at Kennedy Space Center involving the orbiter processing facility, or
Okay, so
OPF.
OPF. So what is the orbiter? I'm confused by that term.
Well, when they had the space shuttles, right, they had three locations where they would bring in the space shuttles to perform maintenance on them. And these were called orbiter processing facilities because the space shuttle was an orbiter.
Yeah.
And they would bring them into these three giant type of high security type garages where they would work on the space shuttles. They'd remove tiles, they'd clear out the fluids, things of that nature. And it took about 100 days to get from start to finish to get it ready for flight.
Okay. So there was a drug case involving all of that?
Yeah, back in 1991, I was at Kennedy Space Center as a special agent with the Office of Inspector General. And really great job. I had kind of worked my way up to NASA OIG. I started off as a military aviator, became a special agent with the FAA, got recruited to be a special agent with the U.S. Department of Transportation, OIG, and then finally got recruited to go to work for NASA OIG. Great job. Around that time, I was working a case involving defective temperature transducers, which are what they call criticality 1-1 items for a space shuttle or a space vehicle. And essentially, what that means is absolutely critical for flight. And if something goes wrong, it could cause a catastrophic failure, 1-1. And so, really into that, focusing on that case, flying all over the country to track down the issues with that. And I get a call, and I'm told that, hey, look, there was a Tupperware container full of cocaine found in the orbiter processing facility. And the NASA administrator had already properly told the world about it. And so my job was to come in and figure out whose cocaine wasn't. And so I'm going like, okay, great, I'll do that. And so the OPF has these giant safe type doors. Go in there. They have 3 shifts, and so I'm interviewing people on all 3 of these shifts to try to find out who the cocaine belonged to. And if I could push back just for a second, each day I would walk in to the OPF. I would walk by the vehicle assembly building, which is by volume the 8th largest building in the world. That's where they put the space shuttle together with the rockets that launch them up into space. And I would pass by a guy with a dog, and the dog alerted to the cocaine. And sure enough, that was what got the NASA administrator involved, and that's what got me involved. So I'm not even thinking about the cocaine. That's already been tested. That's a done deal. I'm trying to find out whose cocaine it was. And so each day I go in and I interview each and every employee that works for the orbiter processing facility. And 13 of those employees over the period of 3 days admit to currently using drugs, narcotics, and just every kind of narcotic you could think of.
They just
One of them
openly admit it?
actually, excuse me.
They just openly admit it? Like,
Well, yeah, I'm a pretty good interviewer. And so, and they not only admitted it, but they wrote out confessions saying, yeah, I use this type of drug or that type of drug. We had some funny situations where In one case, a security guy came into my interview and starts chastising the person I'm interviewing, and I basically had to say, no, that's not the way I do that, because I'm pretty low key in my interviews. And, I'm trying to communicate with the individuals. I'm trying to get them to open up. So day after day, I pass by this dog. Occasionally, I'll stop, pet the dog. The security guy that's in charge of the dog, very proud of his dog alerting to the cocaine. And so the third day I come in and I say, that's really cool that your dog alerted to the cocaine, but I haven't been able to track down whose cocaine it is yet. And he looks at me. He says, "You know what's really neat, Special Agent Gutheinz?" I said, "What? No, tell me." He said, "What's neat is my dog isn't even a drug dog. He's an uncertified bomb dog." And so I'm going like, well, then how in the heck did he alert to the drugs? And he said, that's kind of a miracle he did. I said, well, great. How did you all test the drugs after he alerted to it? Oh, we had a supervisor do a taste test of the cocaine. And my question was, how does he know what cocaine tastes like?
That's gonna be my
And,
question as well.
and so I said, has the lab done an examination of the cocaine yet? And he said, no, not to my knowledge. I said, well, let's get that done immediately. And so we got these 13 guys that have all put their careers on the line by admitting to current drug usage. And and could not get anybody to admit to the Tupperware container. And so it goes to the lab, and I get a call back. Hello, this is Special Agent Gutheinz. How can I help you? We got the results back on that Tupperware container full of powder. I said, okay, it's talcum powder. And I'm going like, do I feel guilty about this or not? Because I got 13 guys to admit to using drugs. It could put their jobs in jeopardy, certainly would require additional efforts on their part in the future. And I guess the bottom line, I didn't feel guilty about it because they shouldn't have been using the drugs in the first place. So, and if I could just back you up a little bit on Kennedy Space Center and why this facility is important.
Okay.
When a shuttle lands at Kennedy Space Center, it's towed over to one of the OPFs. And now two of the OPFs are closed. Boeing has the third one. So we're talking about years ago. And they were brought into the different OPFs, and critical work was done on these shuttles. One of the shuttles was the Columbia. One was the Challenger. Others were, of course, the Discovery, Atlantis, and Endeavour. But this critical work was essential to making sure that the space shuttle didn't explode when it went up into space or came down. When all the work was done in the OPF, it was towed next door to the vehicle assembly building where it was assembled. And then it was brought outside by what they call a missile crawler. And going at 3 miles an hour, the assembled shuttle and rocket boosters and so forth would be brought to either launch pad 39A or 39B, where it would be prepared for launch. And a lot of people think, Cape Canaveral, And a lot of the early missions were from Cape Canaveral, but Cape Canaveral is different than Kennedy Space Flight Center. It actually used to be run by the Air Force, and now it's run by the Space Force. They have like Pad 37 over in Cape Canaveral. We have 39 A and B over at Kennedy Space Flight Center. So this packaged product would be put on the launch pad. It was there was double, triple, quadruple redundancy on just about everything to make sure it was safe. But when it came right down to it, it was dependent on the quality of the workers working on the space shuttles. And when they were using drugs and going to work, that was a problem. And so it was a inadvertent type of fine that we found out that they were using drugs and working on the space shuttle, even though the container proved to be talcum powder. Go forward 18 years or 19. In 2010, cocaine was in fact found in the OPF. And so at that point, I'm sure they did more than a finger test to make sure it was the real thing. And so that was a problem that even continued after that investigation had closed.
So these people, they admit to doing drugs while they were working, or just
One guy admitted to bringing it on center and using it. Others admitted to using it at home and then coming to work high and so forth. And it wasn't just marijuana; it was LSD, PCP, you name it. I had to look up a couple of the names of the drugs that they were telling me. But it was an assortment of drugs, and they basically had two little groupings of guys that hung out together that were using drugs. And so it was like group one, group two, and it was kind of an interesting phenomenon.
wow. So the bomb sniffing dog, why was he there?
I think more intimidation. When people used to walk into, for example, the vehicle assembly building, they would walk by the dogs, and people were careful about what they had on them and what they were taking out of the vehicle assembly building, uh, as though the dog knew that they were stealing contraband or whatever, or bring contraband into the VAB.
When
And by the
they've
way,
gotten
the VAB
go
is a story all by itself. Once had a case in the VAB, and somebody had stolen a computer inside the VAB. And so the theory was that he wouldn't be able to get it out of the VAB, so it had to be there. So I go to these elevators that had not been used since the Apollo days, and I go up. Remember, this is the eighth largest building by volume in the world. I believe it's the largest freestanding structure where there's not office complexes throughout in the world. And so I'm going up to these floors that haven't had people there for years. And in the rooms, these different rooms I had to search, I'd open them up, and for example, they'd have these old computers going up to the ceiling. They'd have documents going up to the ceiling, phones going up to the ceiling in these different rooms. And I know that Apollo 13 had some footage there, and others, but I believe some horror movies were actually made about the VAB. And so it filmed in the VAB. And so I'm walking around, and yeah, you can make a horror movie in the VAB in the upper floors. Creepy old pipes, just total silence, walking around in there. It was really something else. Long story short, never found the computer. I don't think anybody could have. You'd have to take all that trash out, and which, by the way, would be worth a mint uh, uh, at an auction. You'd have to take it all out, sort through it. I'd
Th-
still
These
be down there doing it.
these computers are like the wall size computers, right? How would anyone get those out?
Well, that's no. But the computer that we were looking at was a smaller computer.
Oh,
Uh,
okay, okay.
yeah, but a lot of the computers up there were huge computers. You know, something
Yeah.
you were clearly antiques. But it was very interesting. And another interesting thing about NASA was the crawlers, and they weigh about 6 million pounds. 6 million pounds. They go 3 miles an hour, and you know, you walk around, you look inside that, unbelievably cool. Another interesting thing is going on the launch pads, and I used to go all the way up there. I had cases that would bring me up to the top of the launch pads, and they have like an escape rope that if something's about ready to blow, you grab on it and you slide down to the ground.
Like a zip line?
And a zip line, yeah, a zip line. And the astronauts were actually required to do that. They had to go down the zip line as part of their training. So, you know, I don't know if it'd do much good, because if one of those uh, shuttles were to explode, uh, you know, you'd be
The line's
running.
gonna snap.
Well, for example, you know, the VAB and the launch facilities at Kennedy Space Center, uh, their version of the mission control, but they just handle it through launch. They're 3 miles away. They're 3 miles away from the launch pads for a reason, because if something exploded, that's about how far you have to be away just to be sure that you're going to be safe.
Oh. Going back to the case that we started with though, wouldn't it have been better just to get actually trained dogs instead of just using random dogs for intimidation?
Well, you know, I wasn't with security, and you know from my when I talked to you about the astronaut impersonator, I'm not exactly a giant fan of NASA security, and so yeah, absolutely, they should have had bomb dogs. They should have had drug dogs, and they had an uncertified dog that got a lot of attention for 3 days, and then it was found out that he alerted to talcum powder.
The other thing is the supervisor or whoever was like who tested it, aren't they kind of scientists? No one there thought like maybe we should actually test this?
You would think so, right? That's exactly what they are. They're scientists and engineers. They're people that crunch numbers and uh, deal with test tubes. And you would think that somebody would have said, "Okay, let's figure this out before we tell the NASA administrator that we have cocaine in the OPF."
Because
But
at first when
they
you told
didn't
me like a
think that.
Tupperware full of cocaine, I was like, that's a lot of cocaine.
Yeah, that was a
Like,
lot of cocaine. You know, it was keeping a lot of people alert and awake down there. But you know, that's the problem with what transpired.
that seems like mismanagement.
Well, you know, I could tell you stories about um, problems that I saw with respect to security. Um, for example, and I'm not going to get into this, but the Space Shuttle Endeavour. I actually looked into 33 cut wires on the Space Shuttle Endeavour. The question was, what happened? How did those wires get cut? And so the bottom line is, again, that's in the security arena. as well as quality control, and they're 33 cut wires. So yeah, there are a lot of issues that we've had. We had down at Johnson Space Center, we had blood mailed into JSC.
They milled in
The
blood.
blood, yeah. So yeah, there are issues like that popped up from time to time. And of course, I've been a little bit of a critic of NASA security. I was definitely a critic of the handling of the astronaut impersonator, and a little bit of a critic. I know they meant well, but with this dog alerting to talcum powder, believing it was whatever, he probably thought it was a biscuit, and because he wasn't trained to alert to drugs.
With something like NASA and something like the space program, why didn't they? You imagine security would be of paramount concern.
Well, it is, and but for example, at Johnson Space Center, my last station, every year there's somebody that poaches deer from within the confines, the fence line of JSC. They shoot deer and harvest them and take them off of JSC illegally. One of my favorite stories was a couple. And I'd probably mentioned this in a previous interview that you've done. Of a couple decides that they want to christen the space shuttle, and so they climb into the thing while it's at the launch pad, and they have sex, not realizing that there's a camera on them. And so security sees them having sex. My question is, how did it get that far? How did they feel like they were comfortable to crawl into a space shuttle and have sex in one of the most high secure facilities in the world, in a iconic vehicle that people look at in awe, and here they are having sex in it.
Well, yeah, because my concern would be if it's that easy for them to get in there to do that, if someone wanted to go in there and leave something that could explode, it would be much more
Well, well,
difficult.
well, those are two of the employees that were doing that. Those were
Yeah,
two employees that did it. And just like the employees that were working on the maintenance on the shuttle that were using drugs, right? So, yeah, a real problem.
it's crazy how lackadaisy the security seems to be. You
Well,
imagine it would be they never use like the military for security, like
well, they do over at Cape Canaveral.
oh okay.
Cape Canaveral is the military side, and Kennedy's the civilian side. So Kennedy uses his own security force. Cape Canaveral, they use a military force. I wouldn't want to mess with that side.
Yeah,
I've
it seems a lot safer.
yeah, I've driven over there and on the Cape Canaveral side, and one time I drove over and I hit this giant bird that landed right in front of my car, and felt totally bad about the thing. And I'm going like, and went to talk to their guys. And they said their security force. They said we do it all the time. But it was a different look when I dealt with those guys than I dealt with our guys. These guys, they meant business, and of course, a lot of their rockets are carrying classified payloads, and so they're very alert to Russians or anybody else trying to gain intelligence. Out there at Cape Canaveral.
Did you have any involvement with them really, or just
Just
sporadically here
drove
and there?
through. Drove. One day we used a shack that they have there that the astronauts used to use, for a meeting and on the beach, and that was kind of cool. But basically, we stayed on the Kennedy side. But I have driven out there a couple of times, kind of neat. Uh, but you could definitely tell that side's military.
Very
I don't know
different
about
feel.
Space Force, but Air Force, they were pretty darn strict. And
Uh,
one other thing that was kind of interesting about the space shuttles, right? They launch off, and you think, what happens if it goes awry, right? What happens if it starts turning back to hit Titusville or some other populated area? Do you think that they have a mechanism to prevent that from happening?
I would imagine so.
The Air Force, Patrick Air Force Base, which now controls Cape Canaveral, they have a button they can press to destroy the space shuttle should it pose a threat to human life, which is kind of a inside the beltway. A lot of people know about it, but it was kind of a revelation to me when I found out about
I mean, you would imagine though that they'd have to have something like that. All the
it. Yeah,
fuel in there if it were to explode, like on a
well, it's a
city.
bomb, right? Basically, it's a
Yeah,
bomb. If it hits Titusville, it takes out blocks, and so yeah.
yeah.
So, but all the astronauts that fly up there, they know that that's one of the risks that they're doing. And remember, out of 5 functional shuttles, 2 of them were destroyed. 40% of the U.S. shuttles that flew into space. There was also the Enterprise that was not really space. It was just basically a shuttle in name only. It didn't have the engines or anything else like that. But the
With the
five,
Enterprise?
the Enterprise, yeah, Enterprise. I think if I remember correctly, was housed at Marshall Space Flight Center at least at one time, and of course the 5 space shuttles that everybody has seen flying are the Endeavour, the Columbia, the Challenger, Atlantis, and Discovery. And with Columbia being the first and Challenger being the second to fly, I believe.
I didn't realize it was only five.
Just 5, and we lost 2 of them. We lost 14 astronauts and 2 accidents that were both preventable.
That's yeah, it's sad. I always thought the Enterprise was one too, because you always see that picture of the Enterprise with all the Star Trek actors in front of it.
Right, but the Enterprise, that is the one that uh, they have one. It's a mock-up,
Yeah.
but it's not one of the 5 that flew into space.
Oh, okay. It's
It's
just for show. It's publicity.
Yeah, the Endeavor is the E one that flew into space, and
Oh,
the
okay.
Endeavor is the one that had the 13 cut wires.
Luckily, nothing happened. That one made it back safe, right?
But yeah, it was caught on the ground, and
That's good.
so yeah, that was. But then again, we're talking about are are all these procedures that are taken in order to make sure that a space shuttle or spacecraft doesn't blow up, and with all the procedures out there, it failed twice. And of course, with these temperature transducers I told you about,
Yeah.
when the Columbia disaster occurred, the first indication that there was going to be extreme heat and that there was going to be a catastrophe was when the temperature transducers started clicking off. So the ground could see that, and so really a very interesting type of job, NASA OIG, and a very important function to make sure that the astronauts that fly into space don't have any unexpected issues by having somebody that's sabotaging a space shuttle or repairing it drunk or high or doing something else. And of course, one of the things I loved about uh, this the launch pad was when I was there. There was actually a guy that stole a car from the launch pad and would drive it to and from his home, and nobody knew where it was. He basically just said, "Oh, nobody's using this, so I'm going to just take it." And he did it for like 6 months, right through security.
So when people are coming and going, aren't they checking things? Are they just checking ID? Like,
I don't know. I can't speak for them. All I know is that before I transferred to Johnson Space Center, I was actually involved in that investigation.
you spoke earlier of some guy poaching while he's there. How did he get the deer out of the facility?
I don't know. I'm just repeating what security told me. They said, we have 2 or 3 deer every year poached from on Johnson Space Center. I'm going like, how is that? So you got guys coming in with guns, shooting deer in JSC. How is that
And then
not?
getting the meat out.
And then getting the meat up, throw it on the truck. Sir, can I ask you where you got that deer on your hood? Well, no, I don't really want to talk about it. I
It's just
have no
it's
idea how they got it off, how they got it on. All I know is that's one of the stories that security shared with me, and I'm going like, there's an issue there.
a big issue. I don't even know how you do that. It's insane.
Well, of course, remember there was a time, I believe it was in the Clinton administration, where they were talking about putting wolves on the space centers, to finding a way to try to reintegrate them into the wild. I thought that was kind of a winner idea. It didn't happen,
What
but
was the reasoning behind it?
because they're facing extinction, they lost their habitat and so forth, and there are places on some of the NASA facilities that are really open. For example, in if you go to Kennedy Space Center, you see whole bunches of wild boars running around. Of course, you got alligators and stuff like that. Why not throw a few wolves in there in the
I,
mix?
I do know. I think it was it Yosemite where they took the wolves out and all of the herbivores just started breeding like crazy. So they had to reintroduce the wolves because the plant eaters were killing all of the greens.
Yeah,
So they needed to introduce some kind of predator to population control it.
yeah, and to be honest with you, I have no clue. I think that might have been something that was a trial balloon that went up and it got shot down because it was too ridiculous on its face. And so that was one of the. I'm pretty sure that was the Clinton administration that brought that one up.
I don't know if wolves would have actually attacked any people. I mean, unless someone was injured, they're not really
Well,
going to go after
people talk
something.
about wolves like uh, you know, they're friendly to human beings. I don't know. I've heard of wolf attacks.
They
Uh,
are, but they generally go after wounded people. They don't go after people that are bigger than them, unless they're starving.
so don't limp near them.
Don't live. Yeah. If you look weak, they will attack you. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I guess they're figuring if people are shooting the deer, maybe we can get some wolves in to get a meal out of it as well.
Maybe,
But
yeah. Right.
and of course, the funny thing is that on Johnson Space Center, had they done that, we have actually beef cows and Texas Longhorns that we have from time to time on the land out there at Johnson Space Center.
Well, that
So
would
I
be
can
a
just see
problem.
the wolves going after the cattle.
Yeah, because the wolves would kill them instantly.
But anyhow, so anybody interested in working for NASA OIG, I'd recommend it. It was a fun job, a lot of good cases, and some interesting stuff. And as far as I know, there are no wolves on any of the 10 NASA campuses that they have. So you're probably going to be safe. But
Well, that's good.
yeah,
How long did you work there?
I worked for NASA for 10 years, and I
Okay.
was senior special agent. And so, and then even after I left, they called me back in at one of the cases I had. I worked for them off and on for a year after I
It was like a
retired
consultant or
as a consultant on a case, and it was a successful case that we brought in. But so that was great, and I've also gone against NASA on the lunar Apollo 11 lunar bag, where I was an expert consultant and witness on that, and local counsel, and we won an Apollo 11 lunar bag title to it. And I went to Sotheby's when my client sold it at auction there for $1.8 million.
were those weird? First going back to NASA and not being like the in charge of the department, just being a consultant? Was that odd? Like a weird.
Well, no, I did. I helped on a NASA case, but I actually worked in the U.S. Attorney's Office in
Oh, okay.
a different state, and so I didn't actually go back to work with them. I went to work with the U.S. Attorney on a NASA case, actually
Oh,
on one of my former cases that they brought me back on.
oh, okay, okay. And then was it odd going against them? Like, did that feel weird?
No, because I believed in the case. And remember, I represent murderers. I represent people that commit sexual assault allegedly and arson and so forth. The fact that I'm representing someone that's committed a serious crime doesn't mean that I condone the serious crime that they commit. In the particular case of the lunar bag, I believe that my client was absolutely correct and that the government screwed up. And the reason why was in that particular case, uh, the person that had the lunar bag had his was subject to a raid by law enforcement, and the marshals sold the lunar bag that they secured in that raid at auction. So my client buys the lunar bag at a legitimate auction sanctioned by the U.S. Marshals, and then they try to get it back from her. And so the bottom line was she prevailed. She got $1.8 million for that, and then $500,000 for the lunar dust that was in the bag subsequently. So 2.3 million in
How much
recoveries
did you
on
pay for the bag?
that. She paid about $900 for the bag.
That is probably one of the best investments ever.
Yeah, my wife and I had a great time. We went up to Sotheby's and watched the bag sell, and we're just really into it. And of course, you know that I've had the Moon Rock project in the past. And my thinking is that everybody that moon rocks that NASA brought back from space belong to the people. They don't belong to an individual. With respect to the lunar bag, the thinking was if NASA really wanted it back, they could have spent the $1.8 million to get it. It's still believed that probably that piece of history should be in a museum, but my client did nothing wrong. She was absolutely correct, and the courts found that she was absolutely correct.
Well, that's good. I definitely think they sold it to her. Like it's their own fault.
They sold it to her. You know, it was a lunar bag, a Apollo 11 lunar bag. Here it is. Okay, that sounds like a great pie. She was right.
I'm
And
sure someone
so
got fired for that.
I don't know. But yeah, it was a mistake, but it was a mistake for the government. Not, you know how much they offered her to get the bag back, right?
How much did they offer?
$1,000.
So,
And the judge laughed and said, "What a great deal! $1,000, wow, you know, something like that." Uh, but it was a
It's kind of insulting.
no, it was totally insulting. So, but that uh, from time to time, I'll go against NASA when you need to go against NASA. But I'm a big advocate of NASA and a big fan of all the good things that they do, short some of their sloppy security.
Well, I definitely agree. I'm a big supporter of NASA. I wish we'd start going, doing more.
Well, when I was in, the big complaint that there was, we had the Mir space station leading into the International Space Station. And the engineers and scientists that I talked to said, we're going around in circles. And we've been going around in circles for, now decades, right? It's time to go to the moon. It's time to go to Mars. That's what their argument was. And now, slowly, the next couple of years, we're going back to the moon. And then finally, we're going to go to Mars. And on Mars and on the moon, there's indications of ice, and from ice you can make water. From water you can make oxygen and fuel. And so there's big hopes for both the moon and Mars for a permanent presence there. And you're young enough where you probably could volunteer and go on up there and have a great time.
That would be awesome. I think us starting to go past just, the space station would do a lot to get people excited about it again. Because we had like it's been so long since anything new is happening.
Well, but now we're going to the moon, and
So that's
and
that's
if we're
good.
smart, we're going to go near one of the polar sections where there is ice,
Where there's ice, yeah.
and that's because it doesn't really make any sense to go any place other than that. And you go to a place where there's the possibility of water because that's where you can build on a permanent presence. And guess what? We're not the only ones pointed in that direction. The Chinese, the Russians, Indians, Japanese, and a lot of other countries are thinking the same thing. And sooner or later, somebody's going to be able to put their flag up there and say, we were first. But do you have any other questions for me, John?
No, I think that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for your time.
Great. And uh, perhaps the next time we'll get away from NASA and I'll tell you about one of my DOTOIG cases.
That sounds exciting. I'm looking forward to it.
Take care, my friend.
Take it easy. Thank you so much. Bye.
Take care. Bye.